I've spent 25 years in the IT industry, and I was lucky enough to join a company that has been able to reinvent itself 4 times in 47 years, and every time from a position of strength. So I spent some time on thinking about what does that take. Now the topic today I thought was exactly the right question. How future fit are you? And in order to answer that question, you really have to first answer the question, which future? And I'd like to use an analogy to illustrate that question from the world of sport, namely Formula One. There are 2 reasons for that. First of all, I've spent a fortune to put my company's logo on that car. And that car doesn't drive that fast. There's only one benefit of that. You can actually see the logo when the car comes by. But in the sport of Formula One, there are always 2 types of futures. There's the one future, which is the next race. The next race is about getting a little bit faster in the 1 or 2 weeks you have between the first race and the next race. It's about cutting half a second of a round. If you don't do that, you may start the first race in the season winning, but you will definitely lose at the last race. There's a second future in Formula One, which is the next season. That's when the rules are changed. You need to build a new engine, build a new car, and build a new team. Now, why am I saying that? Why is that important? Well, I believe that the future that we need to get prepared for, how future fit are you, is not the next race. I believe we all, independent of industries that we're in, are facing a next season. That season, in fact, started in 1989, in my opinion. That was the year I graduated. But it's not there for that reason. There are 2 reasons for me believing that new season started that year. First of all, that was the year the Berlin Wall fell, and with that, the world changed from being separated in 2 parts. You could do business in one part or the other part, and suddenly the market doubled. We could get access to new markets. We could get access to new talents. And secondly, that same year, researchers in Geneva invented the World Wide Web. They needed a protocol, HTTP, to be able to share research results on the internet. And that became the technological development that I have been benefiting from, both of these 2 big trends. Now, they have been very significant and are now causing that seasonal change in all industries. Now, what is a seasonal change? Well, Andy Grove, one of the heroes in my industry, defined a seasonal change as an inflection point. In the book, Only the Paranoid Survive, he talked about an inflection point as a moment when market conditions change by a factor of 10 or more. That seems kind of unrealistic that things like that should happen, but in the IT industry it happens all the time. It's due to Moore's law, which says that every 18 months things get twice as fast or has twice the capacity or half the cost. And the consequence of that is that you need 4.5 iterations like that, then you have a factor 10. So seasonal changes has been going on in the IT industry all the time, and if you are preparing yourself for the next race instead of the next season, you got wiped out quite rapidly. Now, most companies have failed to react on a new season, not necessarily see a new season. Kodak invented the next season, and yet they failed to act on it. And Clayton Christensen has actually described that problem in his Innovator's Dilemma, where he basically says that companies that are successful eventually will die because they are unable to kill themselves in the process when a new season comes by. They are unable to reinvent themselves when they're at the peak of their success. They tend to wait until they have trouble, until they have a burning platform. And I ask myself, because I spent most of my career, and I still do, in large companies. Is that really the case? Is there a way for large companies to reinvent themselves when they're strong? To challenge this idea that if it ain't broken, don't fix it. I normally say, if it ain't broken, consider fixing it. Now, to illustrate this inflection point and this mindset problem that we have on inflection points, there was this old story of the two shoe salesmen who went to Africa 100 years ago to explore whether there was a market for shoes. The one shoe salesman wrote a letter back to headquarters saying, "I'm so sorry to report, there is no market for shoes in Africa. They don't wear shoes." And the other salesman wrote back and said, "This is the biggest opportunity ever. They don't yet wear any shoes." That is a different mindset. So why is it that it is so hard to not necessarily see a change of season, but to act on it? Well, I have come to the conclusion that there are two important reasons for that. Number one, we typically have wrong plans. We have plans that are linear. We have plans that look back and then we do an incremental improve. Typically, revenues go up and costs should be contained. I had a manager who told me once, "Jim, whatever you do, just make sure that revenues grow faster than costs and you'll be fine." So you should write that down. It works wonders. Now, the linear plan has a problem if you believe, like I do, that the world we're entering is an exponential world. And the best illustration of that is probably in retail, where in 2008, Walmart was a very prestigious company, market capitalization of $220 billion, one of the leaders in retail. They knew exactly how to run a retail store. That same year, Amazon was a dwarf in the industry. On a relatively flat curve, they were 10% of the value of Walmart. You fast forward 9 years, Walmart, on a linear curve, is proud to present that they have grown their business and the value is now $225 billion. That is roughly 5% growth over the 9 years. Not bad in a mature market. And Amazon is now $500 billion, which is more than twice the value. They've added $100 billion the last 18 months, which illustrates the nature of an exponential curve. The second reason that I think we miss the ability to act on a new season is in our brains. It's our assumptions. We are somehow driven by the experience we have, and it puts assumptions to our brains which we are not necessarily aware of. This is a picture of the Solar Impulse plane, a pretty famous project which was all about flying around the world, only leveraging the energy from the sun. I met the guy in charge of this, one of the co-founders, Bertrand Piccard. He's an incredible guy. His father was as incredible. And he told me the story of building the plane, which was really the hard thing. It was not flying around the world. The plane has a wingspan equal to a Airbus 380. The problem is that in order to have enough capacity for batteries, the plane itself can only weigh 10% of what a plane with that wingspan would normally weigh. So he went to the best engineers in the industry and said, "Hey, can you build me a plane of this size with that weight?" And they all said, with no exception, that is impossible. And yet, a few years later, he flew around the world and he says, "Yes, I went to the yacht industry because the engineers there didn't know it was impossible." So, my conclusion is, we got to challenge our plans and we got to challenge our assumptions. And what I'd like to illustrate is how I believe that the world should look like in companies. I was Monday in New York. I was on a roadshow with Siemens, and when I'm in New York, I always go just 5 minutes to Central Park. I will not be in New York without having had that moment of fresh air and open mind in Central Park. You've probably been there. Now, if you look at this map of New York, you'll see that there are parts of this map which is filled with streets and avenues. When you meet people on the streets and the avenues, they typically look down, mostly on their phone. They typically are pretty busy. They're not necessarily very efficient because traffic is not so easy in New York. You go that 5 minutes into Central Park and you will see people talking to each other. They're typically not busy. They're looking up. I believe they have more creative ideas than the people on the streets and the avenues. If you look at your companies, how much of your company is streets and avenues where people feel they're busy but they're not very efficient? And how big is your Central Park? Where people are creative, talk to each other, and challenge some of the assumptions. To solve this dilemma, I have come to the conclusion that there is one magic trick that could potentially solve this dilemma and allow companies to reinvent themselves from a position of strength and do that continuously as the speed of change increases with digitalization. And that magic trick is leadership. How do we lead today? Well, I have led companies and organizations with this kind of leadership. It's the kind of leadership where I spend a lot of time on defining the strategy for the future, and then in order to make sure that the strategy gets executed, I translate that strategy into a business plan. I actually ask every department to make a business plan for their contribution to that strategy. Then I ask them to make some KPIs, some measures of results, so that I know that they're executing on the plan. And that is then cascaded into the organization. And then I will, as a manager, be very clear that once a quarter, I will do a review, and I will check whether we are on plan or off plan. That works really well if the future is predictable. It does make one assumption, that you can make the perfect plan. But what if you can't make the plan? Because you've never been there. You've never tried those technologies before. You've not seen that season before. Is there a risk that all of those plans are predictions based on our historic performance and not based on the future? It's a little bit like the following example. I will assume that most of you are going home tonight or to some hotel. And I will now, as your manager, make the perfect plan on how you get from here to your home. Then I will measure and agree with you that every 15 minutes I will call you to see where you are and check that you are where you're supposed to be on that plan. And then I will let you go. Now, I will call you the first quarter, 15 minutes, sorry, and ask you, where are you? And if you're not where you're supposed to be, if you're behind plan, the likelihood is that I will call you more frequently, as if that would help you get there faster. Now, why are you behind plan? Well, there can be two reasons for being behind plan. Number one, you don't have the skills to drive the car. Shame on me. I'm your manager. I should make sure that you have the skills necessary to perform the task. The second reason could be that there is unpredicted traffic. Now, if that's the case, things get really meaningless. You're sitting there with a stupid plan from your stupid manager. Reality is different. And the guy is calling you all the time to check where you are, as if that will get you faster forward. That is how we manage many things today. Now, that works really well if it's the old season, and I need to, for the next race, cut half a second because I know the conditions better than anyone. But what if it's a new season? I believe, and I love the word dreams that came a little bit earlier, I believe that the leadership style, and I'm saying leadership style, not management style, the leadership style needed to manage a company through a seasonal change is very different. I call it dreams and details. The dream is about inspiring people to go to places that seem almost impossible, but very inspiring. That excites people to be part of a team that potentially could get that done. And therefore are super excited about that and will not deviate from that possible future. And the details is about practicing every day the things that are absolutely vital in order for the organization to be able to get to that dream. So if I use my stupid example of you driving home, the first thing I would do in this philosophy is I would have a talk and make sure that the dream of getting home is something that you desire. That inspirational moment of coming home, we would talk about that, and yes, we're going home. We're not going to deviate from the plan somewhere in central Copenhagen. And then I would spend time on practicing your skills to drive a car, read a map, and read traffic. And then I would say, good luck, call me when you're home. I bet you that person finds a faster way home than any plan from some management in a corner office would ever imagine. That is the kind of leadership that I believe is necessary if you want to lead a company and reinvent it from a position of strength where you go into a new season where all the rules are not clear yet and you have to experiment. Now, what is this? The dream is not some fluffy blah blah that you can talk about. It is, of course, very much grounded in the purpose of the company. It has a point of view on where the world is going and what role you want to play in that future role. So it has an ambition defined, which is, in my mind, a very high ambition level. Otherwise, it's not inspirational. And the plan is translated into something that humans desire to be part of. At SAP, we made a plan. We wanted to double the company. And we had this dream to double the addressable market and go into new areas and create innovation for customers. And then we've put that in a financial term. We want to be a 20 billion euro company. That's not a dream. That's a financial plan. When we talked about what SAP could do for the world, in a world with 7 billion people and scarce resources, aren't we the ERP company of the world, the enterprise resource planning company of the world that manages resources for enterprises? Whoa, we've done that for more than 40 years. What if we could manage scarce resources for the world across entire value chains? When we talked about that, people got a little bit glary eyes. They became part of a dream, a purpose, which was significantly more than just selling some software. Now, the dream will forever stay a dream unless you take care of the details. For me, the details is a little bit coming back to the sport, is what you need to practice every day in the practice room in order to be world-class at what is most important to reach the dream. This is about the roles you don't have in the company. This is about the abilities that you don't necessarily have in the company and how the company is supposed to work. At SAP, the biggest challenge we had was that we were way too slow on innovation. We were 14.7 months between iterations of cycles, and our competition in the cloud were down to 6 months or even 3 months. So we knew that if we didn't double the speed of innovation, we would not be a 20 billion company in 2015. So what did we do? We practiced speed of innovation every single day until we got twice as fast. And we knew that if we do that, the results will come automatically. Because it means that we will deliver twice as many innovations to our customers with the same resources. I tell you, that will grow revenues, but not costs. Here's a dream that people understand. This will tell you what a dream means when I talk about a dream that inspires people. Kennedy's speech about bringing a man to the moon and safely back again was the ultimate perfect dream. He could have said, we want to be technologically advanced versus the Soviet Union in these categories of technology. But he didn't know what those categories would be for the future. So he converted that idea into a very simple dream that when you heard that sentence, everyone knew what he was talking about. Nobody knew how to do it. But everyone got inspired. Do you have a dream like that in your company? A dream that makes people come up every morning and say, I want to fight until the end for that dream. I don't know how to do it, but I will find a way. Now, how do you find a way is, of course, about the details. And for me, it's not just the details. I've been in companies where we had must-win battles. Anyone with must-win battles? We had up to 30 must-win battles. Here's my rule of thumb on details. You, as the senior executive of the company, have to spend at least a third of your time on each of the details that you decide are critical to achieving the dream. For most people, that means you can only have 3. If you don't spend that time, nobody will care about the radical change that is necessary in that detail. I quoted Steve Jobs here because Steve Jobs had realized that in order for him to achieve the dream of being the preferred technology choice for people, he needed to leverage the fact that he controlled hardware and software, a fact that had lost him the first wave of battle with Windows. And he realized that the benefit of having hardware and software from one hand was that he could create a better user experience, end to end, from buying the product, unpacking the product, opening the product. Have you seen when you start a MacBook, the first thing that happens, it says, welcome, in 42 languages. Windows says, installing, please wait. Steve Jobs spent more than a third of his time on that detail. He would never accept any wrapping of a product that wasn't beautiful, any experience that wasn't perfect end to end. That's the kind of detail, focus, that you need to have if you want to change the season and believe to deliver on the dream. Now, my summary of what it could take in terms of leadership principles is very simple. First of all, you have to be the challengers of the assumptions. The assumptions are all right in the old season, but they may be wrong in the new season. What if self-driving vehicles drive better than human beings? What does that do to the buying patterns of people? Why would they buy a car if they can get transport end-to-end almost for free? What if that's the case and you sell insurances? What's an insurance of a car that doesn't bump into anything? What if energy is for free and totally sustainable? What does that change for your business if that was the case? These are the kinds of questions to challenge the assumptions. Secondly, you got to dream big. You got to be on stage and impress people with your passion about that dream. This will unleash human potential like you've never seen in the people who work in the streets and the avenues. I believe you need to focus on the 2 or 3 things that you are not good at today that are absolutely essential for you to be good at achieving the dream. Forget about measuring outcomes. Measure your ability on those 2 or 3 things. If those abilities improve, the results will come and you will achieve your dream. And trust people is maybe my biggest recommendation. To lead this way is to kind of let go of control. You don't have a plan. You don't have all the KPIs. You know where you're going, and you practice the things that really matter. And then you let people go. And I can only say from my own experience, when you do that, you will be surprised what human people can do when they are allowed to. And our old management style does not allow them to do that because it's focused on efficiency in streets and avenues, not on changing a new season. And finally, you got to be authentic. You got to believe in this so much. And if you don't get every single one in your organization who claims to be a leader to be as passionate about exactly that same dream, not their part of that dream, but that dream, you will never achieve it. In 2008, I had this epiphany about leadership. I thought until that moment that leadership was all about increasing my power so I could make better decisions for the organization who didn't know the good decisions. And I realized that leadership is about enabling people to be powerful. Let me end where I started. I believe we live in an incredible moment in history. The technological advancements will be able to create value chains that are sustainable, increase quality of life, and increase opportunities for human beings. But since this new season started, with those two parallel tracks of technology and geopolitics opening up, the geopolitical dimension has gone backwards the last 4 or 5 years. Why is that happening? I believe it's happening because people are concerned about that future. We talk about disruption. What a stupid word to use, because it does not contain any opportunity. It only contains change. Why do we talk about robots and artificial intelligence taking jobs away and leaving people unemployed and useless? Isn't this the moment in history where we can use technology to do the boring tasks so that we can focus human beings on being human and using their full potential as human beings in relationships, in creativity, in finding new solutions? That is, in my mind, the opportunities we have. We will never get a bigger opportunity to reinvent this world. The path there is super difficult, and it requires a lot of leadership. As leaders, I believe that we are responsible for awakening the potential in the people we lead so that we can all create a better future. Thank you very much.